Hey you guys, guess what month it is? That's right, it's Jam Plus month over at Apogee. And what better time to talk about long distance collaboration and remote recording than while we're all stuck at home? I get requests sometimes from producers or artists to play bass on tracks that they're working on. Usually, when I'm at home, I use my Apogee Duet for that, sometimes with a preamp and sometimes just plugged directly into it. And that works great, of course. But sometimes I'm on the go, on the road, traveling, and that's where my Jam Plus comes in. I usually don't leave home without two things in my bag, and one is my hype mic, the Apogee hype mic, great mic, and I'm in fact using it right now to record my voice for this video. And then, of course, there's the Jam Plus. Now, this is my third mobile Apogee device that I've had. I started with an Apogee 1, and then I had the Jam 96K, and now the Jam Plus, and it's really, really a great upgrade. It feels nice and heavy. It's mostly an aluminum body, and this kind of like grippy, kind of rubbery material on the back. This right here is where you plug in your instrument. Up here is where your headphones plug in. And by the way, you can use this even without plugging anything into the bottom of it. You can use this as a headphone preamp if you need to do some critical listening to something. It's got that Apogee digital to analog conversion, and it's awesome. Great as a headphone preamp. This is where you plug in your cable to your computer or your tablet. The Jam Plus works with Mac, PC, as well as iOS devices, and it comes with all the cables that you might need, USB-A, USB-C, and Lightning as well, so that's great. Right here, this little wheel is where you adjust the gain for your instrument, and you can also click it, and that alternates between two modes, a clean mode and an overdrive mode. The overdrive mode is mainly for, let's say you're a guitar player and you're plugging into a software amplifier, and you find that it doesn't really have the punch or the immediacy or the realism that you want, and so the overdrive mode just gives you a nice little boost, and it just makes it all sound a little more realistic when you're playing through a software amp. But the other mode is a clean mode, and that's what we'll be using today to track some bass. This little knob up here is a blend mode, and I'll save that for later because that's relevant for when we're tracking. Okay, so what I thought might be fun is to kind of take you through my process. Take a track that somebody sent to me, go through the whole process of setting up a session, setting up the gear, tracking some bass, dealing with the tracks themselves, and then sending them off to the producer who sent them to me. And let's pretend for the purposes of this video that I am on the road and all I have with me are my laptop and my Jam Plus and a bass guitar, and want to do some tracks. A while ago, a friend of mine who's a great producer, her name is Adrienne Gonzalez, sent me this track called Spotlight, and I really love this track. It's just drums and vocals. It's a really snappy, poppy, super focused track, and really fun to kind of create some parts too. The singer on this track, by the way, is an artist who goes by the name Monogem. Look her up; she's awesome. All right, so I'm going to show you my screen here, so I can kind of take you through the whole process. So right here we have the track that Adrienne sent to me. This right here is the main track, and she also very helpfully provided me with a piano reference, just some chords to show me what she was thinking for the harmony of this track, since the main track is only drums and vocals. Before I play this track for you, you might be wondering what this is down here. This is a utility called Snapper, and it's super handy. It just kind of lives on the background in your computer, and whenever you click on an audio file, whether it's a WAV or an MP3 or anything like that, it gives you this overview and, just gives you a little bit more information than just hitting spacebar and getting the preview like that. There's all kinds of utilities built into it, but, I basically mainly use it as an audition device. So without further ado, let's take a listen to Spotlight. Oh, and by the way, I chopped this track up to just be an intro and a verse and a chorus, just because I felt it would speed things along a little bit. All right, here we go.
when you sing in the shower, dance like a fool, like you're losing your mind. Ooh, 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 baby, tell them all the truth. Got nothing to lose. Ooh, ooh. It's alright living in the spotlight. Ooh, oh, yeah. All night, love you in the spotlight. Ooh, oh, yeah. Don't need to force it.
What a cool track, right? So awesome. I already came up with some parts for this. For a poppy track like this that is so focused and so specific, my tendency is to write parts, you know what I mean? To come up with parts that are as focused as that track is, rather than, write a chart for the track, which I might do with like a singer-songwriter track or a rock track. I might just write a chart and play it a little more free form, just kind of come up with parts as I go along. For this, I wanted actual, written parts. So why don't we start up a session and see what we can come up with here. I'm working in Logic Pro. That's an awesome program. Obviously, the concepts that I'm talking about here apply to any DAW that you might be working in. I like to work with templates. Meaning I basically have a session that reflects exactly how I like it to look, and it has all the functionality in place. If you don't use templates, I highly recommend doing so. It just speeds things up, and you don't have to do the same things over and over again when you start a new project. So this is my basic template. Let's go back to the original file real quick that I was sent. As you can see right here, this is a 24-bit audio file, 44.1K, and so I just want to make sure that this is set to 44.1 as well. I happen to know that this track is 147 beats per minute, and that'll do it for now. All right, and there's our session. What's the first thing we do? That's right, we hit save before we do anything else. I'm just going to save this as Spotlight Bass. And then, anytime you do anything that matters, just hit save. Just keep hitting save. You don't want to be caught with a crash or something like that and everything is gone. So one of the first things I want to do is go into the preferences and go into the audio tab under devices and make sure that my Jam Plus is selected as my input and output device, which it is. As far as the buffer size goes, I could get away with setting this probably as low as 64 samples on a very, very simple session like this that is just a couple of audio files. That would be fine, and I wouldn't really have any latency problems. But let's pretend for a minute that this is a huge session with all kinds of virtual instruments and plugins that cause a lot of latency, and I need to set my buffer high for the session to even play and for me to record on it. The reason I'm doing that right now is so I can show you the blend mode on the Jam Plus, which is great. All right, so I'm going to hit Apply Changes. We can close this up. And it's time to pull these tracks into this session. So let's go back here, we'll select them both, and dump them right in here. Create new tracks, yes, and here we go.
Don't need to hide what you feel when you feel it, you know you gotta.
All right, for now I'm going to turn this piano reference off. I know what the chords are, and I kind of already came up with my parts, so I don't really need it. I like to put my tracks not right at the beginning of a session, just because once I'm ready to play some bass, I don't want the attack of my first note to be cut off, or for there even to be a chance of that. So if I put them on bar 2, I can start recording a little bit before and make sure that I get the full attack of my first note. And I'm going to turn down the main track here a little bit, so it's a little easier to hear what I'm doing on bass. So let's make a bass track. I'm going up here, new audio track, and let's call this P bass direct. So on the channel strip over here, you notice this little section up here, and this is actually really, really great about the Apogee stuff, is that they have a very tight integration with Logic, and you can adjust your settings for your Apogee device up here. Most of these things are grayed out because they apply to other things like microphones and other interfaces, and the Jam Plus, really the only thing, as far as I'm aware, that you can adjust up here is the gain, which, obviously you could do it with the little wheel over here, but you can also set it over here and be really precise about it. So let's grab our bass, and if I play it right now, you're not going to hear anything. I could turn on input monitoring up here, and then we do hear it, with tons of latency because, of course, our buffer setting is set high. So that's not really workable. So I'm going to turn that off, and instead I'm going to turn blend mode on the Jam Plus. And here we are. No latency whatsoever. I'm hearing my bass directly from the Jam Plus into my ears. And once I'm ready to record, everything will be aligned exactly how it's supposed to be. All right, so checking my gain here. That looks good. You just want to make sure that you're not too loud. Once things start distorting after you record something, that's a lot harder to deal with than turning it up a little bit if your levels were a little bit lower. But this looks pretty good. So generally, when it comes to tracking bass to a tune, I like to just do an entire pass and then maybe one or two more. Not overthink it, just kind of like go for it and, let your instincts guide you. And then if I can, I'll even put it aside for a while, maybe for a couple hours or even a day, so that I can come back to it the next day with fresh ears and see what works and what doesn't. In this particular case, like I said, I kind of already wrote my parts, so I'm not going to worry too much about like what works and what doesn't. I just want to make sure that I play it well. So on that note, let's record some bass. All right, hit save, of course, and let's do another one right away.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. You gotta move.
All right, hit save. All right, so what we got here are 2 takes of my bass part. I kind of liked my first take. First takes are always the best. But if there's anything, sort of like excessive fret noise, I don't worry about that too much. But if there's something egregious, then I might just grab a little snippet from the second take and just pop it right in there. And it's super easy to do. If you haven't done that very much, it basically goes like this. So right here, this felt a little messy in my first take, so let's see what the second take sounds like.
Don't need to hide what you feel when you feel it. You know you gotta let it shine. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You gotta move like you do when you sing in the shower. Dance like a fool, like you're losing your mind. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Baby, tell 'em all the truth. Got nothing to lose.
All right, so right there, felt a little sloppy.
Got nothing to lose.
Let's grab this part.
Got nothing to lose. Ooh. Ooh.
Cool. Good enough for me for now. And, as far as the actual part goes, this is obviously fairly busy, you know what I mean? And I'm a big fan of playing to support the song and all that stuff, of course. But, every once in a while, if you hear something that inspires you and it inspires you to play something that's a little more out of the ordinary, I say go for it. You can always rein it back in if it turns out to be too much. All right, so that's our direct track right there. I'll close this up because I'm happy with this comp. Regarding compression and treating this track before you send it out, there's no real right or wrong answer as far as I'm concerned. Some people would now take this track and get the levels up and compress it. I tend to leave it the way it is and send it off if I'm happy with the performance, just because I know that whoever's mixing this on the other end will want to do their own things to it and use their own favorite compressors and all that kind of stuff. So I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. What I do like to do is have an amp track in addition to this direct track. Now, if I am at home, I can use an actual amp. I have a really great Ampeg B15 that I sometimes like to reamp through. But again, for the purposes of this video, we're pretending that we're in a hotel room somewhere with just the Jam Plus and a computer. And so we don't really have that option. And so that's where plugins come in. And there are so many great amp plugins out there. I recently came up the Plugin Alliance bass amp plugins. They're awesome. And so I'll just do a track with that plugin. Meaning I'm going to use this track and then feed it into the plugin, and then we'll have the direct and the amp option for the mixer to deal with. There are a couple different ways you could do that. I could create a new audio track and I could copy this particular performance onto that new audio track, put the amp plugin on there. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a send to a available bus. I'll just take the first available one here, bus 1. And that shows up here. I'm going to call that P-Bass amp. And I'm going to raise up the level here to get some level to it. And I'm going to go to my Plugin Alliance SVT. And this is what that looks like. And let's see what it sounds like. I want to make sure that my level going into it is, at a healthy level. Great. And this is what they sound like together. I'll bring the amp level down a little bit so I can kind of like start bringing it in. nice. And together with the rest of the track, it sounds like this.
Don't need to hide what you feel when you feel it. You know you gotta let it shine. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Cool. Happy with that. I did have one other idea for the verses, and that is to do a little track with my Hofner over there, played with a pick, in addition to what we have going on here on the P bass. And I'll just kind of go through it and show you. It's just a little sort of like sonic weird idea that I think might be cool for this particular track. So let's create another audio track, and we'll call this Hofner 1. By the way, I know it's spelled with an umlaut, but you know, we have better things to do here. And let's get this bass. All right, and the output of this bass is a lot hotter than the P bass, so I'm just going to go up here and turn that down a little bit. Cool. And I'm going to play the exact part, and I'm going to play it twice, and then I'm going to treat the Hofner a little bit, and I'll show you that in a minute. But let's record it real quick.
Don't need to hide what you feel when you feel it. You know you gotta let it shine. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You gotta move like you do when you sing in the shower. Dance like a fool, like you're losing your mind. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Baby, tell them all the truth. Got nothing to lose. Ooh.
All right. And then at the very end, I want to record the little, you know, the part where the verse comes back.
Ooh, oh, yeah. Don't need to force it.
All right, cool. And I want to do that one more time on a separate audio track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, while this track is selected, I'm going to hit this button right here, and it creates another track exactly like it with the exact same settings. I'm going to call that Hofner 2. I'll mute this real quick, and let's record.
Don't need to hide what you feel when you feel it. You know you gotta let it shine. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You gotta move like you do when you sing in the shower. Dance like a fool, like you're losing your mind. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Baby, tell them all the truth. Got nothing to lose. It's so
Cool. And then the last one here.
high. Ooh, oh, yeah. Don't need to force it.
All right. So here's the idea I had for this. And again, it's a little out there, but hey, man, we're having fun over here. I'm going to pan these left and right. I'm going to take both of these tracks and I'm going to put them in a track stack. Sometimes when you have tracks that clearly belong together and you want to have a little control over them together, putting them in a track stack is a great idea. Like this right here, we'll call that Hofner in all caps. So you can solo and mute it together, if that makes any sense. So on that note, let's see what they sound like together. Cool. And so the idea I had was to put a fake guitar amp on this, and Logic has a great complement of virtual amps. Let's get this one out of the way. If you click this little button here, that makes sure that there's only one plugin window open at any given time. That's kind of how I like it. So that's what this sounds like. Cool. Let's change the reverb to a spring. Cool. And I'm going to change the mic on it to a 57, and I'm going to move it out of the way a little bit. Cool. I like that. And then in the mixer window, I'm just going to copy amp 1, 2, amp 2. And if we play them together, that sounds like this. Great. The only other thing I want to do is I want to put an EQ on it and get rid of all the low end so that they don't interfere with the main bass track. Because really, this is just a color. Like, I'm almost treating it as a guitar track, right? So let's turn on this high pass filter here and bring up the level. I'll do it as I play it. Cool. And together with bass, that sounds like this. I like that. And let's see what it sounds like with the main track. Yeah, man, I'm into that. And so, you know, obviously that last little bit with the Hofner, that's, you know, nobody asked for that. But every once in a while, if you're feeling something, I say go for it. If you have an idea, if you know, if you want to play something else, play a tambourine, sing a background vocal, play a guitar part, whatever you have in your arsenal that you think might make the track that somebody sends you better, go for it. You know, they can always discard it if it's if it doesn't fit their vision of the track, but just get creative. All right, there's only really one thing left to do, and that is to get these tracks exported and ready to be sent off to the producer. And so let's just do that one by one. I just use the bounce function of Logic. I solo the track that I want to export. In this particular case, with my direct bass track, I want to make sure that I turn off the send to my bass amp because I want to export those separately. And I just go to bounce project. Because I have selected this region right here, that is the exact length of the bounce, okay? And so right here at start and end, it automatically has it set to whatever I recorded. I want to do a full resolution file, 24-bit, 44.1, all looks good. Let's call this Spotlight P-Bass Direct. And let's double check that. This should be our direct bass file. All right, and let's go back to our bass amp and export that. First of all, I want to make sure that I turn my send back on so that the bass amp gets fed a signal. I want to turn this solo off and this one on. One thing to keep in mind is make sure that your levels are back up to a healthy level, just so that the mixer who's dealing with it has access to the full dynamic range of your file, and then they can turn it down in their mix if they need to. So this looks good. I'm going to select this same region just so I know for sure that the length of this next bounce will be the same as the previous one. But obviously I have my bass amp soloed. Okay, so there we go, same settings, and we'll call this amp. And let's double check that. Great. And back to the Hofner, and so we'll turn this solo off, and we'll turn the Hofner track stack solo on. Cool. Again, I have the same region selected, so the resulting file is the same length. And we'll call this Spotlight Hofner. And double check that. Great. Well, that about does it. I hope this was entertaining and useful to somebody out there. I hope you're staying creative out there and doing remote collaborations with people from really anywhere. That's the beauty of today's technology, that we can do this even while we're stuck at home. Again, hope you had fun. Stay creative, stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane if you can, stay inside. All right. Thanks for listening. I'll see you. Bye.